Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Lower Hudson Special Education Task Force program titled Bright and Struggling, Twice Exceptional Students, also known as 2E students. Let's talk about students who are gifted and have disabilities. My name is Jean Lucchese, and I chair this regional task force. Before we begin the program, I want to mention that attendees can turn on closed captioning by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. You can then select either Show Subtitle, which will show the captions as subtitles on screen, or click View Full Transcript, which will show a chat box with all of the captions. I also need to share our notice of recording, and so here it goes. This training will be recorded to ensure the information will be available to all who are interested. If you don't want your image to appear on the recording, please turn off your video. If you don't want your name to appear on the recording, please change your name by clicking the three dots, which are generally at the bottom of your screen. Select Participants, hover over your name, select More, then select Rename to type in an alternative. For those of you who are not familiar with the Lower Hudson Special Education Task Force, we are the regional arm of the New York State Special Education Task Force, run under the auspices of Disability Rights New York. LHSETF seeks to bring together the full spectrum of special education stakeholders in programs such as this one to promote positive outcomes for students with disability. We are so fortunate to have with us an incredible panel tonight. These three highly knowledgeable and experienced panelists are Lois Baldwin, Melissa Sornick, and Maritea Contarella. Their credentials are extensive, so I'll just share some brief highlights. An expert in the 2E field, Dr. Lois Baldwin has been both a teacher of 2E students and an administrator of the Gifted Special Education Program operated by Southern Westchester BOCES, one of the first programs in the country serving 2E students. She has assisted teachers and staff with curriculum development, student issues, transition planning, assessment, and professional development. She co-founded the Association for the Education of Gifted Underachieving Students, known as AEGIS, the first such advocacy group in the country. She has taught college courses on giftedness and twice exceptionality, has spoken at numerous national conferences and symposiums, and has co-authored several professional articles and chapters on the topic. She is an advisory board member of Gifted NYS. Next up is Melissa Sornick, a licensed psychotherapist and consultant, specializing in support and services for gifted children, including 2E children with social, emotional, or academic challenges. The co-founder and president of Twice Exceptional Children's Advocacy, known as TICA, she has worked with gifted and 2E children and their families since 2003. Ms. Sornick has presented at regional and national conferences, and she developed and taught a college course in using a systems approach for working with children with special needs and their families. She's an advisory board member of Gifted NYS and maintains private clinical practices in New York City and Long Island. Finally, Maritea Contarella is a social worker specializing in mental health support and coaching for parents of gifted and 2E children. Ms. Contarella has served as executive director of Twice Exceptional Children's Advocacy since 2015, building it into a national online resource for parents of 2E children. She has developed parent workshops focused on reducing conflict and improving communication between parents and their children, developed and moderated numerous panels for TICA's annual conference, and written extensively for the TICA Talks blog about raising a 2E child. She currently works as a psychotherapist and parent coach in the private clinical practice of fellow panelist Melissa Sornick. This evening, Dr. Baldwin and Ms. Sornick will present on a range of topics related to 2E students and their family, along with a presentation by Ms. Contarella. We will reserve time at the end of the program for our panelists to address participants' questions, with LHSETF Exec Council Secretary Alyssa Galea moderating as necessary. I really want to thank our participants who sent in some great questions ahead of time. Participants tonight may type questions into the Q&A space at any time during the panel program, and the panelists will answer as many questions as time permits. Please note, though, that the panelists will not be able to address fact patterns about individual students. Instead, we ask that you frame your questions broadly so that all participants can benefit from the discussion. Also, please know that the panelists are not providing legal advice to attendees. Rather, they're offering general information. You should consult your own attorney regarding personal legal matters. And with that, I turn the program over to Dr. Baldwin, Ms. Sornick, and Ms. Contarella. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, and thank you. I am very honored to be here to speak about one of my absolutely favorite topics, that being twice exceptional students. So let me see if I can get my presentation up here. Okay. And we will get started. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we're talking about twice exceptional, 2E students. Who are they and why should you care about bright and struggling students who are gifted and learning disabled? So before I get started, I want to make two comments. First of all, this is simply an introduction, and it's hard to, in a half an hour, give you everything that you should ever know about who these 2E students are, but this is simply an introduction. Secondly, I think it's very important for you to understand that New York is one of 8 states that does not mandate gifted services or education. Therefore, New York State teachers and educators are not required to understand, recognize, identify, or provide services for gifted or 2E students. And I put that up front because I think it's very important for you to know that when we talk about our questions at the end, and I would like to further have a discussion about that when we get to the end today. So as we look at this, 3 blind men tried to identify what they were experiencing when they walked into a room with an elephant. The first one touched the trunk and said, "Oh, it's a fire hose." The second one touched the leg and said, "No, you're wrong. It's actually a tree." And the third one touched the tail and said, "Well, you're both wrong. It's actually a rope." Well, the twice exceptional field is a relatively new field, and the field became very clear, just like the 3 blind mice, that we had different ideas about what it was to be 2E. And we realized that we needed a shared vision and a common language about 2E. So in 2013, a group of us, including myself, a number of professionals and parents, pulled together 35 respected organizations and universities, such as the National Association of Gifted Children, the Council for Exceptional Children, the National Association for School Psychologists, Johns Hopkins University, the University of Connecticut Gifted Program, and the University of Bell and Blank, the University of Iowa Bell and Blank Center for Gifted Education, to develop a 2E definition. So that community of practice did develop, after many hours and many days of work together, a definition, and that's what I'm going to share with you this evening, so that we will all understand the elephant in the room as one entity and not as very separate pieces. So, oops, didn't want to move forward. Hold on a minute. So here's the definition. I'm not going to read it to you entirely. I'm going to break it into pieces so that we understand each piece of this definition and what it means for a 2E student. So the first part of the definition says that twice exceptional 2E individuals, and the reason we use the word individuals is because we wanted to include from pre-K all the way up to the world of work. So 2E individuals evidence exceptional ability and disability, which results in a unique set of circumstances. Their exceptional ability may dominate, hiding their disability. Their disability may dominate, hiding their exceptional ability. Each may mask the other, so neither is recognized or addressed. So let's look at disability first, identified first. These are kids who start out in school and really struggle. You know, they may have difficulty learning to read, they may have difficulty writing, they may have attention issues, executive functioning issues, and so they struggle in school. And they're first noticed for what they can't do. And because they're noticed for what they can't do, and the focus tends to be on the disability, they're at risk because the focus is on the deficits and rarely or never on the gift. And they have difficulty giving themselves credit for their own abilities. They often refer to themselves as dumb, stupid, or I'm an idiot. And these basic skills are emphasized over creativity, curiosity, and higher level thinking. And I find that to understand all of this, it always helps to look at a kid. And so we're going to do 3 different case studies today. And this is Lance's. So Lance is a 2nd grader. He was identified for special education when he was in kindergarten because he has autism spectrum disorder. He spends half a day in the special education classroom for reading and math, half a day in the gen ed class with a paraprofessional. He's progressing with decoding, but he's struggling with the complex reading comprehension. He likes school, but he finds it confusing and unpredictable. Some of his challenges are when he's stressed or confused, he'll twirl his hair. In fact, he's getting a bald spot where he keeps twirling it, flapping his hands, hiding under his desk, or crying. Classmates don't pay attention to him, and he doesn't have any friends. And he spends recess wandering the periphery of the playground, talking to himself or looking at the plants and trees. But Lance has a number of really wonderful strengths. He loves science class. He has advanced knowledge and vocabulary in botany and some aspects of biology. He has his own scientific lab at home. He draws diagrams and pictures of the growth and parts of plants. His mother is actually very surprised by his sophistication and accuracy of his drawings, and he knows many scientific names. He likes fiction books. He likes to look at them, and he devours science television programs. The school is unaware of his interest or passion for plants. Then we look at the second category, which is the gift and the talent is identified first. And these are kids whose achievement or talent is noticed early, frequently because they are highly verbal and have advanced and sophisticated vocabulary. The problem then becomes when they start to hit an issue when they're in school, whether it's a reading problem, a writing problem, a math problem, an executive functioning problem, an organizational problem, time management. They try to compensate for it, but they have great difficulty doing so. And they don't understand why their brains tell them they can do one thing, but their hands or their heads won't let them do the other. So they're frequently passed over for special education support because they may be achieving at or near grade level. And when struggling, they're often thought to be lazy, not trying hard enough, or underachieving. And these are kids who will say to us, you know, I don't want to fail. If I could do it, I would. And so effort doesn't always equal success. So this is Hadley. She's a 5th grader. She's active, verbally precocious, social. She was identified for the gifted program in 2nd grade. She participates in the gifted pull-up program twice a week. She's an active participant in social studies, likes to discuss current events, history, and politics, and has a strong sense of justice. But some of her challenges are that she has, at the beginning of the school year, when they did the universal screener, she came up in the 40th percentile for reading, but in the 95th percentile for math. That's quite a discrepancy. Her writing is limited to short sentences, few descriptions, very basic vocabulary, especially for a girl who has sophisticated vocabulary, and a lot of spelling errors. She's overwhelmed by homework. Assignments that should take her a half an hour take twice that amount of time, and her mother frequently finds her in tears, and her mother's very concerned. The teacher has discovered that her that Hadley's pace is very slow and labored in reading and writing, and she too is very concerned. So we look at Hadley's strengths, again, highly verbal, scored in the 95th percentile in math at the beginning of the year, demonstrates creativity, curiosity, and advanced humor, excellent memory, remembers facts and details in lessons, especially when it's presented orally. She's concerned about social justice, the feelings of others, the world around her. She has wonderful leadership skills and social skills, and she's popular with both students and teachers. So now we look at neither the gift and talent or the disability is identified. This is what we refer to as the masking effect. So the disability masks the gifts mask the disability, and the student, it appears to be average. So the student may function at grade level, but well below potential. And the gifts frequently emerge in a specific content area or in a particular learning environment where non-traditional methods are used. So we're going to look at Pedro. He's a 9th grader. He likes physical education, music, and pre-engineering computer-aided design, or CAD classes. He participates on the football team and track team and gets average grades in all content areas. Teachers are frustrated with him because he appears to be daydreaming, doodling, and not following directions. And he's always losing his homework and rarely completes long-term assignments. Some of his challenges are that his notebooks are a disaster with paper scattered, no discernible system of organization. He has no time management possibility. He misses numerous deadlines and papers and projects. He's impulsive. He calls out answers, which disrupts class flow. And he's late for first period math 2 to 3 times a week because he oversleeps. So, but if you look at his strengths, he likes to take apart old computers and small appliances to make new devices. He has earned money fixing other people's devices. He has strong critical thinking skills. The English and history teachers note that he makes interesting insights and connections that other students miss. He often works past midnight on his personal projects, which now makes sense that he's late to school 2 to 3 times a week. And he won first prize for his science project. And some of the teachers were very impressed, but several questioned whether he had really done work. So now let's look at the definition again. 2E students who may perform below, at, or above grade level require the following. And there are 3 categories, and we will go through all 3. The first is specialized methods of identification that consider the possible interaction of the exceptionalities. So one of the things we know about 2E kids is that they have these incredible strengths and the incredible challenges, and these come together and they conflict, they bang together. And so the interaction of these dual characteristics and behaviors creates the need for a unique set of supports that are different than the supports that a typical high ability student would get or one with a disability would get. The combination of these 2 characteristics require a dual approach. So we're going to look at the paradoxical behaviors. If you look at the left-hand column, it's really behaviors that are typical of many gifted students. And then we look at the right-hand column and how it interacts and demonstrates itself oftentimes in a 2E student. So gifted students may have highly developed language skills, as many 2E students also have, but 2E students may have a reading or a writing disability or, other speech and language issues. A gifted student can be unusually sensitive to self and others, and our 2E students can be equally sensitive, but also highly critical of themselves and others, including their teachers, their parents, and other students. A gifted student may have extraordinary critical thinking skills. Well, so may a 2E student, but it may be regarded as disrespectful or bizarre because of the types of questions they ask. They're really, many of them, out of the box thinkers. And so they think differently. And a gifted student can be productive in the area of strength, as can be a 2E student. But a 2E student may also be disorganized and unable to keep track of their papers, their belongings, time management, and have all sorts of executive function issues that interfere. Oops. A 2E student, a gifted student may be knowledgeable about many things, as also is a gifted student, but they can't necessarily remember simple facts. They may have an issue with their working memory. So simple facts like multiplication table facts and spelling words are often very difficult for them. A gifted kid may be creative. Well, so can a 2E student. In fact, they can be so creative that they come up with many very creative excuses as to why they didn't do their homework or why they didn't finish an assignment in class. A gifted student may have an excellent sense of humor. Well, we know so do many of our 2E students. They can be the class clown, or they can appear as rude and or sarcastic. A gifted student may have task commitment. Well, so may a 2E student, but because of short attention spans or other issues with the disability, it may interfere with them being able to finish or be committed to that task. And then our gifted students may have in-depth interest, and many of our 2E students have many interests or just very specific interests, and they can become very preoccupied by those interests, which becomes difficult to move them off of those interests, especially when asking them to do something in their non-preferred area. So we need to look at how we can begin to recognize these students. And that means we need to look at many different data points. And so there's a procedure called RIOT, and it's just a nice little acronym for review, interview, observe, and test. And so in order to determine whether a student is in fact maybe twice exceptional, we need to review records, look at the cumulative folders, look at work samples. Where does that student show real interest or strengths and possible giftedness, and where does that student begin to show us they're having difficulty and things are challenging for them? Interviewing teachers, the families, the child, significant others, where do they see some of the strengths happening and where do they see some of the challenges happening? Observations, going in, having conversation, watching when the student is interacting with other peers, the student-teacher interaction, what the parent to child interaction, when students getting instruction, how do they respond to it? Are they listening? Are they having difficulty? And then of course, looking at tests, curriculum-based, behavior rating skills, norm reference, criterion referenced, what data points can we get from that? Does the student do better when they're taking a test on a computer or when they're doing multiple choice and true and false versus writing an essay? So it's looking at all the data. What data points are really the most valuable and most salient to determine whether a student needs to go for a formal evaluation and assessment and identification through the Committee of Special Education. So that leads us now to the second area, which is enriched. 2E students require the following: enriched advanced educational opportunities that develop the child's interests, gifts, and talents while also meeting the child's learning needs. So this is a very important area, and the research is very clear about this, that we as educators and parents need to focus on the students' gifts, talents, strengths, and interests. These kids are gifted. And so if we don't focus on that, we are missing the boat and missing their potential. So again, the first thing to do, our goal is to develop the gift and the ability while managing the disability. So now we look at the dual programming options, dual differentiation and programming. And I always say, look at the gift first. That's where, again, these gifted kids, and it's very important to focus in on the gift. And it's important to be providing opportunities and activities that are enriching and that provide greater depth, breadth, and complexity. And this can be done by the family and by the school. So when we look at this, the left-hand side is the gifted side. And we're going to start with acceleration. Acceleration means that we've increased the pacing of the lesson or the curriculum. And this can be done for a variety of different subjects, but it's usually done in the areas of math, reading, spelling, those sorts of activities. And most acceleration activities can take place in a classroom. Oops, why did that do that? Sorry about that. In the gen ed classroom. And so, and there are examples of students who also get accelerated because they get moved on to other classrooms in other kinds of settings. So the most acceleration takes place or can take place in a classroom, but rare examples might be a student who's moved to a different grade or a different class to be accelerated. So an example of that would be a first grade student who is working on third grade math curriculum and is moved to the third grade to be provided with that skill, or her classroom teacher may be able to provide that skill. Or a seventh grade student, and I know one of these students very well, who got in the 95th percentile on his math curriculum, both in 6th and 7th grade. And the teacher finally realized that he was so advanced, and ultimately talked to the high school algebra teacher, and he was placed in that high school 9th grade algebra class. Or it could be a little third grader who works in at a 5th grade reading level and goes to another class just for reading and has that opportunity. So before doing that kind of acceleration that takes a student out of class, that would be a very important time where there's collaboration between the parents and the teachers and the whole team to determine that this is the right approach for that student. The next one is content extension, and this is learning and teaching strategy that adds depth, breadth, and or complexity to the learning experience. For example, a student studying American history may be a Civil War buff, while the class is studying the areas of the typical curriculum of the Civil War that this student already knows. That's the teacher could assign the student a project that might go into greater depth by analyzing the details associated with a particular battle or political speech. Or to add more complexity, the student might be asked to explore the multiple perspectives of the Confederate and Union soldiers, or analyze the changes that have occurred over time in the American culture due to the Civil War. I have a personal example of a 7th grade student who I observed in his gen ed English class. The teacher had asked the students to read the first chapter of their new book for homework. Well, the following day, at the beginning of the class, she asked the class a question, and the 2E student raised his hand immediately when the teacher called on him, his response was, "Spoiler alert, spoiler alert." And so he had already read the entire book the night before, and he wanted to have an in-depth conversation about the main characters and the plot with the teacher. After class was over, the teacher and I had a conversation, and I said to her, "You do realize that he is going to continue to do that for the next 3 weeks while you are trying to have a conversation with the rest of the class." And I said, what you might want to do is assign him 3 other books that are on the same topic, where he can spend his time analyzing and comparing the topic through whatever lens you feel is important, and compare and contrast and put together a PowerPoint. Well, she loved the idea, and so did the student. He did not see that as more work. He just saw it as work that was appropriate for him. It was a win-win situation. So then we go down to higher order thinking skills. And these should be taught to all students, particularly to 2E students. They should be asked to apply, to analyze, to synthesize, and evaluate what they are learning on a regular daily basis. Then we can look at differentiated instruction. And this is to give students options and alternate activities that are different from the basic curriculum. Once the teacher and or the parent has identified the key concepts that all students need to learn in a curricular topic, the teacher can either assign or allow students to choose from a menu of options how they're going to extend their learning. And I'm going to give you a sample of what this looks like. So this is a graphic that can be used to help students look at how, or teachers to look at how can they differentiate. So the middle of the wheel happens to be looking at the higher level thinking skills or the thinking skills. And so the one that's most used in classrooms is the one on knowledge and comprehension. We want to see if kids really understand what we're teaching and are they gaining knowledge. But there's also application. Can they apply what they're learning? Can they analyze it? Can they synthesize it? And can they evaluate? Those are the higher level thinking skills. And so the second tier of this graphic is basically looking at the kinds of questions or activities that can take place. So when we look at application, it could be to sketch, to paint, to interview, analysis, to classify, to categorize, to compare, to dissect, synthesis, to combine, to compose, to hypothesize, to role play, to create. And under evaluation would be to judge, to debate, to discuss, to editorialize. And then if you look at the outside ring, those are all the different types of activities that a student could participate in or do in order to demonstrate. Those are the products that demonstrate that that student has gained knowledge and is able to utilize those thinking skills. So now the fifth box here is affective and guidance and counseling. This is an extraordinarily important piece to a 2E child's understanding. And this is an area of social and emotional growth and understanding. And I'm going to leave that to Melissa to discuss this evening, and she will be on next to that. So then we go to the right side, which is the challenges, which really focuses in on remediation, accommodations, and modifications. And so looking up there in the far right corner here, or far left corner, is specific programs and tutoring. So this can be done again at school, where there are programs, multisensory programs for reading and writing, and wonderful programs for math. And there are programs for speech and language, and a number of different kinds of specific programs that can be used with children who have a disability or who are 2E. And then we go over to the corner and look at compensatory strategies. These are very important for our 2E kids. They need to learn how to take notes and how to study, how to do long-term projects and all sorts of compensatory strategies. But these days we have so much wonderful technology that can be used with these students, and videos and audio books and text, voice to text, and iPads, and beautiful programs on math on computer. So it's important that if you feel that a student needs technology, that a technology assessment is done so that students can be on an equal plane. Over here, small group and direct instruction. A small group can be 1-to-1, can be 1-to-2, 1-to-5. And direct instruction is that you're really teaching a direct skill right to that student based on that student's needs. And then differentiated instruction, we've already talked about that. It can be used to accelerate and meet the needs of the gift, or it can also be used to meet the needs of the disability. And then again, that area of affective and guidance and counseling, very, very important for 2E students. So let's look at Lance and let's see what happened to our little second grader who loved science. So, or actually the parents during a parent-teacher conference met with the classroom teacher and the special ed teacher and had a discussion about Lance's incredible strengths that they were seeing at home. So the classroom teacher decided to pre-test him for the Rainforest Science Unit and determined that he indeed already knew most of the important concepts that she was teaching. She determined that he would be involved in an individualized personal enrichment activity during those science class periods. And so she said, given time during science class and support from the classroom teacher, the special education teacher, the paraprofessional, Lance would be able to create an independent project that compared and contrasted 3 trees from his neighborhood to 3 trees located in the rainforest environment, as measured by a score of 3 out of 4 on a teacher-created rubric within a 4-week time period. So it was very specific. It didn't need to be trees, could have been plants, could have been birds. That would be a discussion that the teacher would have with Lance and possibly his mother or parents, and to determine what Lance was excited about and wanted to work on. Hadley, remember we talked about Hadley, the 5th grader, who was struggling in reading and writing. And after a referral by both the teacher and the parent to the Committee of Special Education, Hadley was assessed and was identified and determined to be dyslexic. She will receive multisensory reading instruction 5 days a week. The gen ed and the gifted education teachers will integrate learning accommodations into her activities to make them accessible to Hadley, such as audiobooks, voice to text, videos, and graphic organizers. And because she had such an issue and interest in social justice, the assistant principal will invite Hadley to join the school superintendent's youth task force on mediation and bullying prevention. Pedro, remember, loved taking apart machines, and so his CAD and pre-engineering teacher knows that Pedro demonstrates more skill and knowledge than other students in his classes. And he believes that Pedro is ready for a subject acceleration and/or supervised project of his choice, and they will sit down and have that conversation. At the same time, the CAD pre-engineering teacher will add him to the high school engineering Olympiad team. The team is building a robot for sorting recycled materials and will be in competition with other high school teams. So here's a form that if you choose to, you can use. It often is helpful to look at both sides of the dual needs of these students. And when I always, as I said, start with the strength, because these are gifted students. And so when you're looking at the strength, you want to know what's the student's interest, what he or she is really good in, and decide what intervention can happen. This should be done, if possible, with as part of a team with the parents, the teacher, the special ed teacher, or whomever else is part of that team, to decide what intervention. And we've already gone through 3 interventions that were part of the 3 case studies. Who's the interventionist? The interventionist can be the classroom teacher, can be the special ed teacher, could be, and I've seen some really wonderful special ed teachers take on individual gifted projects because they love doing that and they know how to individualize. It can be the music teacher, it can be the CAD teacher, it can be the art teacher, or even the librarian, the gym teacher. So, and then determine what's the frequency? How often are you going to work on this project or this intervention, and for how long? And then what's this student teacher ratio? Is it 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-5, 1-to-10? Different interventions can have very different kinds of student teacher ratios. What's progress may be monitored and what materials are needed. So the third category for 2E students that require the following are simultaneous supports that ensure the child's academic success and social emotional well-being, such as accommodations, therapeutic intervention, and specialized instruction. Well, we've touched on all of that, and I'm going to leave the social emotional well-being to Melissa and Mara. And so the last piece of this definition is that working successfully with this unique population requires specialized academic training and ongoing professional development. So thank you for listening. And at this point, I'm going to hand it to Melissa. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lois. And I will pick up where you've left off with the social emotional. I'm going to get my slides up here. What's happening? There we go. Okay. Just, play from start. Oh, good. My technical is working. Okay, so what I would like to pick up with is understanding and supporting the social emotional needs of 2E students, building healthy self-esteem and resilience. And I just want to bring up again that Lois had mentioned the lack of gifted mandates in New York State. And this really not only impacts, obviously, the academics, but it really has a direct impact on the social emotional lives and experiences of our 2E children and adolescents. So again, that's something that's really important to think about. So in getting started, so when it comes to social emotional characteristics and needs, there's often a belief that gifted individuals easily adapt to situations and they don't have a need for much, if any, support in the area of social emotional support. And unfortunately, this simply isn't true for gifted individuals, including those who are twice exceptional for many reasons. And to understand the social emotional needs of 2E individuals, we really need to look at characteristics, behaviors, and Lois spoke about this too, this commingling of certain strengths and challenges and what that looks like across a number of environments. So when we start out, one of the things that I've noticed as a clinician and a social worker is the social cognition, behavior, and 2E individuals. So what we find is that 2E kids really typically know about following rules, they know about taking turns, asking permission, sharing, they know about good manners, kindness. They can teach this, and they often try to. They're often able, ready to explain, remind, and reinforce appropriate or expected social behavior. So what's the disconnect here, right? I think that part of it is that we need to understand the difference between intellectual and emotional development. And that can be a bit confusing when observing unexpected behaviors in gifted and 2E children. And we may wonder why an intellectually mature child has difficulty managing their behavior or navigating certain situations, including social situations. So let's take a look at some of those characteristics and those factors and some of the social emotional experiences of 2E individuals. Okay, so one of the big factors that I see, and I'm going to talk about it some more here, is asynchronous development, or this uneven development in skill sets. Lots of them, they are, academic and social emotional. We also see challenges in executive functioning. We see a lack of theory of mind or perspective taking, right? So you see a highly precocious child, yet they're not able to navigate and understand situations because of a lack of perspective taking. There is an intensity in gifted individuals. We're dealing with, as we know now, everybody's talking about neurodiversity, right? So those neurodivergent characteristics come into play. We have anxiety and depression, sensory dysregulation, and I will talk about all of these aspects of perfectionism that runs in gifted and, of course, then 2E individuals. And we'll talk about learning disabilities, and all of these different characteristics really impact the social emotional well-being, stability, and then again, the behaviors of children. And how do we, we really have to figure out how to identify them and how to support and help students manage them across their environments. So one that I do like to talk about is asynchrony, right? So when we talk about asynchrony or uneven development among skills, including intellect, emotional maturity, physical development, these often underlie surface problems of inconsistency in social cognition as well as academic performance. And they can create certain challenges in the classroom, especially when, we don't know what we're looking at or what might be going on. So, it's really important to understand what underlies these behaviors. And, perhaps you're familiar with some of these characteristics that I've described. So it's also important to note that unexpected behaviors may not be expressed across all environmental settings, and that behaviors that are exhibited in school may not be seen at home, and vice versa. So when we're talking about intellectual intelligence, we also should be careful not to mistake or confuse intellectual intelligence with emotional intelligence. And in many 2E children and adolescents, there can be a significant discrepancy in intellectual and social emotional maturity, with social emotional maturity sometimes lagging as much as 5 years behind, in contrast to intellect that can be as much as 5 years ahead. So I'd like to describe a scenario that I often use to explain this is, imagine a field trip to the Museum of Natural History and for a 3rd grade class. And you have the child who can get up and assist the guide, the museum guide, and knows every fact about dinosaurs that there is to know. He can get up and speak very articulately, knows their facts. Everything is super spot on. And then they go to the gift shop. And then there's a problem about choosing a souvenir. And the same child that has been so articulate and has shared all of their facts now has a meltdown because they can't decide which souvenir they need to purchase from the gift shop. And so we see this disparity in the maturity between the intellectual and the social emotional. So the thing is to think about what this experience or this asynchrony might be like for a child or an adolescent, particularly when confronted with expectations of peers and adults in their environment. And these experiences can lead to anxiety, and they can lead to depression as well. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about executive function in the brain and how this plays into what we see insofar as emotions and behavior. So what we know about executive functioning is that executive function and self-regulation skills depend on 3 types of brain function. One is working memory, then there's mental flexibility and self-control. And these functions are highly interrelated, and the successful application of executive function skills require them to operate in coordination with each other. So basically what we're looking at here is if we look at reactions and response, emotions, errors, processing, but then we look at the frontal lobe, the frontal cortex, and that's where we have behavioral control, use of rules, risk, rewards, and decisions. That is the frontal lobe, or what I like to call the command center or control center of the brain. And that is the last part of the brain that matures. And so, especially when you have a precocious child whose brain is rapidly developing, creating synapses like crazy, that's an awful lot to control with an immature frontal lobe. And what I often describe it as, if you think of wiring in the walls, and your walls, and if they're not insulated, you can imagine when 2 wires touch each other and they're not insulated and you get these explosions. Well, when the brain is not fully myelinated and we're waiting for that frontal cortex, and by the way, sometimes that doesn't finish myelinating until well into the age of 20 or so. We see these, we see the outcomes of these short circuits in the brain. What I've noticed is that in middle school, we see some of this, some behaviors changing with the right supports, because something happens, something called specialization or pruning happens in middle school with middle school age children. And as the brain is starting to myelinate and some of these synapses are pruning themselves, we see a little bit more control, but we don't see that until maybe 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. And that's a long way to go getting through middle school, and what the repercussions of a misunderstanding of the behaviors that we're observing, can cause with regard to self-esteem and performance in the classroom. So another thing that we look at when we look at gifted and twice exceptional children is intensity, or what we call overexcitabilities. And there was a theory, an overexcitabilities theory that was talked about by psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski. He called this the theories of overexcitabilities. And what they are was Kazimierz Dabrowski identified 5 areas of overexcitability. And if we think about what we see with 2E kids in a classroom, we can picture a lot of this. The first one is psychomotor. These are kids that just can't sit. They're up from their chairs. Some of them need to be able to stand. They may not be able to sit at a desk and function. They'll fall out of their chairs. So accommodations can be made to help them be more comfortable in a classroom, right? So they're very active. They're always on the go. Then the sensual ones. We've seen this. These are the ones who, if there's a tag in their shirt, they need to rip that tag out automatically. If there is a seam in their socks, they may be wanting to take their socks off in the classroom. Pants may be, or clothing may be too tight, it may be too loose. And all of these, the sensory input can interfere with their comfort and their learning. Even the temperature in the classroom, or noise, or smell, or anything like that. 2 areas of trouble. I ask parents where they see their children having a lot of difficulty in school, especially the younger ones. And what are those 2 environments? Lunch and recess. Because there you have noise, you have, there's not a lot of structure, there are a lot of smells, there's just a lot of sensory input that these children have difficulty dealing with. Then, of course, we have the intellectual, and we've been talking about that. Lois talked about it. These are the gifts. These are the strengths. They have tremendous strengths and tremendous gifts. Imagination. They are very creative. Some of them are daydreamers. So sometimes it's hard to know what's going on inside their heads, but they have phenomenal imaginations. I remember once I was doing a talk at a local elementary school on Long Island, and one of the parents there had brought her little girl with her. And about halfway through, she wanted to come up and introduce me to her imaginary friend who she had brought with her. Her friend's name was Lucy. So I said, of course. So this was a 6-year-old. So I got down on one knee to introduce myself to Lucy. And the little girl said, why are you kneeling down? She's 14 and she's up there. So these are the kinds of imaginational experiences that are just so endearing when we really pay attention to what's going on with these kids. And these are the intensities. And then, of course, the emotional, and this is why it's so important to understand what the social emotional lives of these children is like. I call them more when it comes to emotional. When they're happy, they are so happy. When they're angry, they are angry. When they're sad, they're inconsolable. So when we think about them and we look at their reactions to things, we really can see the intensities or overexcitabilities there. And these are all just things to keep in mind to familiarize ourselves further with this profile and the social emotional aspects that come into play. Here's another one, perfectionism. So one would think that a perfectionistic child would be trying their best to do things, get things done, and show all of their work, etc. Well, I think they'd like to, but there's something that stops them, and that's that nothing is ever good enough. And they have, it's a really common trait among 2E individuals, and it can really be problematic for 2E students, especially when their strengths are masked or compromised by their challenges, right? So there's a lot of unrealistic self-expectations. There's a tremendous fear of failure, even fear of disappointing a peer, a parent, or a teacher, and it may result in refusal to complete or even attempt assigned tasks and projects. I've spoken with teachers that say, I don't understand if they're perfectionists, they're not doing anything. Well, they're not doing anything because they're afraid that what they're going to do isn't good enough. And so sometimes they will completely shut down. And when these behaviors are misunderstood, they can actually even be mislabeled as oppositional defiance. So we have to really be careful when we're looking at these kids as to why they're not doing their work, or why they don't seem to be meeting expectations. And then again, so what does this look like? This really impacts behavior, and it can impact it both at school and at home. So compensation for challenges throughout the day can lead to decompensation or emotional emotional self-regulation at school, at home, or both. And some 2E students internalize their feelings. So we don't know what's going on with them. They can remain invisible in the classroom. And sometimes we don't know that there's something going on until we get to the end of a marking period, or something is reported at home, so far as getting work done. Some externalize their feelings, and we need to know what that looks like too. Some exhibit troubling behaviors at home only, some only at school. Compensation, again, for areas of challenge throughout the day can result in shutdowns or meltdowns at home, especially when difficult emotions have been kept in check throughout the day, or when a student is using all of their strengths to compensate for their challenges, and they're working really hard and they've got nothing left when they get home. And there's homework to do, and that's when, the struggles with parents that Mara will probably speak more to, about, finishing their work when they've used up their whole tank of fuel all day long, trying to just meet the challenges of school. These difficulties can include not only academics, it can also, include social interactions and being able to navigate those throughout the day, because we know that, certain 2E children have difficulty in their social interactions and reading cues and trying to figure out what certain social situations are, what's going on in certain social situations. Students who are triggered in the moment or experience severe anxiety may manifest a fight-flight behavior in school. When challenges become overwhelming, they may, be running out of the classroom or arguing with the teacher, ripping up their work. So we see a lot, we see a lot of behaviors that, if we don't understand what's going on, can seem to be very challenging and insurmountable. So when these challenges become overwhelming, they can also include a student being bored. Boredom can cause certain behavioral challenges in a classroom, a mismatch in teaching and learning styles, or learning disabilities, or any other identified factors. So I'd like to talk a little bit about strategies and how we can best support these children. And I think it really needs to come from school and from home. And one very important thing is some training to understand what we're looking at and really what these kids need. And I think that what we really want to do is figure out ways to help these children and adolescents with resilience. How can I be resilient? How can I know that even if I go in and I have a bad day today, I can depend on myself, and I can learn, and I can have a better day tomorrow. And I think that where that comes from is a focus on strengths and teaching and promoting the self. So it's about building skills in self-awareness, and building skills in self-regulation and self-acceptance. And that's really important too. And I think we also get there by entering through areas of strength and helping students identify what their strengths are, and being able to feel good about themselves. And the support of an understanding mental health professional, such as a school psychologist or a social worker, positive relationship with a teacher, and a predetermined safe place to take a break when needed. These are all good ways of supporting 2E individuals in school. Sometimes it could be just as simple as giving a child an errand to do when you see that they can't sit in their seat anymore, just giving them a walk down the hall, finding out who they can connect with in the school. Sometimes it's the school librarian. There are different places that kids can feel safe in and feel supported by. And I think that we want to also teach them, mindfulness, and we want to teach them about strategies they can use in the classroom. We can give them, again, breaks. We can teach them about deep breathings, ways to calm themselves. Again, it's important to have a trusted person, whether that be a teacher, social worker, counselor, librarian, and a safe space. At home, a safe, comfortable space can be created for taking a break, which is also helpful. As are supports for emotional health outside of school. And ideally, that would be the support of a psychologist or social worker who works with gifted or 2E individuals and their families. And this can be a great positive support for both child and family. So these are things that we need to do to provide these levels of comfort so that kids can self-regulate in the classroom, and so that they can also learn to identify their challenges and figure out and be able to ask for what they need. And I think that self-advocacy is incredibly important. I have parents ask me sometimes, should my child know what their disability is? If they have an IEP, should they be familiar with the IEP? Should they participate in meetings? And I think that by middle school, any child that has a 504, has an IEP, should be part of their team, and they should know what's going on, and they should be able to learn how to advocate for themselves. Because the other thing that we know is that by the time they get to high school, parents aren't really admitted into these environments, and kids really need to be able to advocate for themselves. And I think it's a really empowering experience, rather than treating them like they're broken and using this model that always starts with the disability. And unfortunately, with the laws, the lack of mandates, unfortunately, a lot of these kids are identified for what they can't do. It's important to really start with, as Lois said, what their strengths are and what they can do, and giving them a voice and empowering them in that way. And so how do we start this? How do we start this dialogue, and how do we help? So I think it really starts with partnership. And that partnership is with the two people that know this child best, and that would be the parent and the teacher. And a good, positive, authentic relationship building with these two, a relationship with these two is really, really key. There has to be collaboration, and this is the heart of the team, so that we can talk about what's going on with the child. The teacher knows what they're seeing in school. The parents can talk about what's happening at home, and they can start a plan with whatever might be put in place to help this child be more successful in the classroom. So I do think that collaboration is really key to starting this dialogue and creating appropriate supports for children. So now that I've mentioned parents, what I'd like to do is talk more, like to introduce you to Maritea Cantarella, who will talk about the critical role that parents play in the need for support of 2E parents as well. Mara's role in our clinical practice and in TICA centers around providing education and support for parents of 2E children and adolescents. And I'd like to have her speak a little bit about that now.
Thank you, Melissa. I don't have a presentation, but can you release your screen share? Okay, great. Hi. So thank you for having me. And I really just want to tip my hat to Melissa and Lois, who shared so much really important information in such a short period of time. And I'm going to try to keep this short so that we have enough time for Q&A. So, what we've been talking about now this evening is how we can support twice exceptional kids. And I really wanted to put a plug in for parents and how important it is for parents of twice exceptional kids to get support too. This is a hard job that we have, and the resources that are available are scant. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, although it is better now than when we were bringing up our kids. But so I have a few points I want to go over. The first is when you realize that your kid has some kind of difference, that can bring up a lot of emotions. For parents, there can be fear, doubt, sadness, confusion, self-pity, feelings of alienation. It's a lot. And so the first thing I want to just validate for you is having these feelings is normal. It is okay to have them, and it's important to have them, especially when the reality of your parenting experience doesn't meet your expectations. So I want to say, don't judge yourself for having these types of feelings. It's natural. And I encourage you to seek opportunities where you can have your feelings validated in a safe space, away from your children, maybe with your partner or a good friend, or maybe a trusted family member, someone who is safe and non-judgmental. Maybe you have a therapist. We as parents really need the opportunity to share, the struggles that we are going through, right? And it's not to say that our children are a burden. What I'm saying is it's hard work. And we need our own team. Like we talked about, teamwork is so important. And you know, when you're raising any kind of kid, particularly with a 2E kid. So I encourage you to pay attention and attend to your own needs. Don't neglect yourself. It is so easy to slip into a self-sacrifice mode, you know, and in many ways, I feel like our culture encourages it, like, oh, I must be, you know, this fabulous mom and do everything. And it's, you know, it's baloney, right? We have to take care of ourselves first. We have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. And if you're not doing that, you can't really take care of your family. So yes, I see sacrificial altar of parenting. Yeah, that's baloney. I could use stronger words, but I'm not going to. Yeah. And then, yeah, so attend to your healthcare needs, spend time with your partner, make sure, you know, you are, and sometimes, I love this one mom told me, sometimes I just go to the cupboard and I open the jar of vanilla and I smell it because it smells really good and that makes me feel better. So anything that you can do to boost your well-being. The next thing is to look for a community where you and your family and your child are validated. Where is that? It could be anywhere. It could be in a support group. It could be in social spaces like a robotics club or a Lego league or a maker space or a game cafe. These are the types of environments that tend to attract 2E kids and their families. And, you know, dig, the internet is full of great resources. I put together a resource sheet that the organizers will share with you after the event. But, you know, these are spaces where you may connect with other families and have a sense that you're not alone. It's also important to remember that it's not your job to be everything to your child or to solve all of your child's problems. This goes back to the team building that Melissa and Lois referred to. So build your team and then delegate and coordinate. And I like to think of myself as the CFO. I'm the chief family executive. Especially for stay-at-home parents who can feel like, who may have mixed emotions about that or whatever, seeing yourself as the executive and then delegating, getting lots of support is a great setup for you. And then as you're building that team, of course, it's important to find providers who understand twice exceptionality or who at least are very empathic. You want to find team members who are willing to work collaboratively with one another. And again, I refer you to the organizations on the resource sheet that I put together, as well as some really wonderful articles that refer from everything to education, to advocacy, to social support. So you'll find a lot of good stuff on there. And then when it comes to parenting, remember to put your relationship with your child first. A lot of the times when our kids are melting down and we're just getting into a power struggle with them, remember that winning the battle of wills may feel good in the moment, but it's at a cost, right? And it's important to remember that, these are kids who do have, as Melissa was saying, asynchronous development and overexcitabilities. They are more, and they can't help it. They are doing the best that they can. So when you can remember that these meltdowns and other forms of behaviors, remember that they're a form of communication. It's the way your child is communicating the things that they don't know how to put into words yet. If they could comply, if they could complete, they would, they can't. And so keeping this in mind, when, the setup for the parent struggle, battle of wills has been lobbed at you by your child, don't take the bait, try to stay grounded in the moment. And another thing is that a lot of parents come to me and they say, oh, I am terrified that my child is going to end up, living in my basement, and they're going to be 400 pounds and they'll be on their computer. Like, they all come up with the same image of the 400-pound adult living in the basement, spending all their time online. So I think that's a, kind of a meme that has taken hold of our imagination. And when we parent our children from that place of fear and anxiety, when you are thinking about that possible future outcome that terrifies you, you need to catch yourself and remember that you're not at your best when you parent from that place. You need to parent the child that you have in the moment, who is right before you, who has asynchronous development, who has overexcitabilities and intensities, and who is unable to communicate what, in words, what they need to communicate. So I also encourage you to have empathy and forgiveness for yourself. No parent is perfect, and you are doing your best with insufficient resources. And the last thing I want to say is to remember that your kids are actually more resilient than you realize. And the most important thing that they need from you is your unconditional love, to know that you have their back, and to know that you believe in them as they are. And that is where I am going to conclude my remarks. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I do think we have time for a couple of questions. Elisa Galea is going to get us started with that, and then we'll have time for very brief concluding remarks. So Alyssa, you've got the questions. Thank you.
I do, so I'm going to try and lump together and summarize a few that came in for our presenters. So one question is strategies or advice for parents in advocating for their 2E children, particularly when there are behavioral concerns that have been raised by the school.
Yeah. Oh, Lois, you're muted.
Sorry.
You were talking. Okay.
Okay, so part of the reason I started with the fact that New York is one of 8 states that does not mandate gifted education is that it's very frustrating for parents because they see their child's gifts and strengths and challenges and asynchrony and all those things that we've all been talking about tonight. And teachers and parents will come in with all of this information to a school and say to the school, my kid is 2E. And a lot of the teachers in New York State, this is not true across the country because there are states that clearly spend time training their teachers on what gifted and 2E kids are. But in this state, a parent goes in and says, my kid is so amazing and he's doing all these things at home, and my kid is 2E, and the teachers will look at the parent what's 2E? They haven't heard that term before in New York State, many of them. And so then you've got this incredible mismatch of, the parent wanting to see their child really their potential met, and the school wants to help the child, but the school hasn't been trained. And so when we talk about emotional issues, they go, teachers go back to what they learned when they were trained. And oftentimes it's not updated. It's not helpful, and especially isn't helpful when you're talking about a gifted kid who's got all these asynchronous and overexcitabilities and other issues. So it's a very hard, it's hard. And so it's going in and trying to explain and sit down with the teachers and work collaboratively. Again, try to get to that teacher who you think might be able to be helpful to you, or the psychologist, or some person in the school who might be able to help you. That's where you want to start, with a collaboration. And if that doesn't work, then you have to go outside of the school and get yourself an advocate, or other resources. But Melissa, Mara, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add that I think it's really important for these kids to buy into any kind of interventions or strategies. They need to be part of the solution.
Yes.
And so they need to figure out what it is that's going to help them. These token economies, unless it's something that a gifted kid or 2E kid really wants, and then once they get it, they're done because they're not invested. They don't respond to extrinsic rewards. They respond to intrinsic rewards. And so again, we go back to the strengths and the interests, and that will help, but you have to understand the child, and you have to understand where they're operating from. And really, a parent with the child together is the best way. That child has got to be part of the problem-solving team.
You have to talk to that child. I mean, I know a lot of people think that that's not important, but it's absolutely crucial with a 2E student. Melissa's absolutely correct on this.
Yeah, I concur. It's got to be a meaningful solution, meaningful to them, because if it's unilaterally imposed on them, they're just gonna reject it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's meaningless to them.
Thank you all. For another question that came up is, related somewhat to the previous one, but for teachers who either encounter 2E students or want to learn or train themselves more on the subject, what are some things that they can do to better support 2E students in their classes?
Well, I mean, I think that one is to find out what 2E is about, to start reading some of the articles. We put together a reference list. And so there are articles on that reference list that parents and or teachers can read to get more information. There's quite a bit of information out there now on the internet. There are organizations that are very actively talking about 2E, blogs, and so even, for example, the state of Colorado, I worked in the Twice Exceptional program out there, training the trainers and training teachers all over the state. And we developed materials and workshops, and and videos. And so you can go to Colorado Department of Education and look at some of those videos. And Bridges Academy has developed a number of resources also. So there are, and Alyssa is going to be sending out our resource and our reference lists for everybody to see. So I would go back and look at some of those things to get more information.
I think you can also the teachers can reach out to their administrative people and see if they can arrange for trainings, if this is something that they really want to know about. And we have good resources in New York, because I think the New York piece is important as well. Experts or consultants here that understand the public education system here in New York and how it works. But teachers can go, I encourage teachers actually to go to their administrators and say, hey, I've got these kids in my class. I need some training here, because we know that numbers get results, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. I want
And
to did you have something quick to say, Mara? I'm going to wrap up in just a minute, but you can have a minute if you'd like.
Oh, no, I was just going to respond in the chat to someone who asked me about books for parenting. I would recommend The Explosive Child by Ross Green and A Parent's Guide to Gifted Children by James Webb. and I can add those to the reference list and resend it to you guys.
And before you end, one of the things that I think is extraordinarily important is that in New York State, again, we don't have a mandate. And currently there are 3 bills in the assembly. And I think it's time that we begin to advocate and become a voice and really get out there and start to say, we need something in this state for our gifted and 2E kids. And if we don't do it as a group, it's not going to happen. And so they need to see numbers of us that are concerned about these kids, and really, we need to work on this. So Alyssa will be sending you out 3 pieces of legislation that are currently in committee, that haven't come out of committee. And so we would encourage you to read them and look at them. This has been put together by the organization Gifted NYS. And we also encourage you that come look at Gifted NYS and, find out more information about what's happening in the state with gifted students. But Alyssa will be sending that out also. So they wanted to make sure I said that before Jean brought us to a closure.
Okay, thank you. It was so great seeing so many people eager to learn ways to support our 2E students in their lives. And I want to thank everyone who attended tonight, and 1,000 thanks to the panelists. This has been a real education for me, and I hope the participants felt the same way. Really opened my eyes about a lot of things. I want to thank fellow LHSET exec council members who helped plan and present this panel, and including Julie Passman and Jessica Bauman, Marion Walsh, Debbie Goddard, Alyssa Galea, who managed the Zoom tonight, and Jennifer Lamoth, who spearheaded tonight's presentation. And as was mentioned before, we will send out emails to all participants with notification and a link to the recording when that becomes available. I'm told that's typically about 2 weeks. And we will also include the resource sheet that Mara has prepared, and information regarding Gifted NYS and their advocacy. So thank you so much, everyone. And please tell people who, other people who might be interested in other types of programs from our group. Just spread the word. It's been great, the turnout tonight. Thank you very much.